Sleeper PC build, 20-year-old case, absolute monster inside. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Tech Bowl. Now, this computer sitting in front of me, it doesn't look special. It doesn't look expensive. Honestly, it looks like something you'd find in an abandoned school computer lab in the early 2000s. But inside, this completely boring beige box is one of the most powerful gaming PCs I've ever built. This is a true sleeper PC, and today, I'm walking you through how a nearly 20-year-old case was transformed into a modern gaming monster. What is a sleeper PC, and why build one? If you're not familiar with the term, a sleeper PC is exactly what it sounds like. From the outside, it looks outdated, unassuming, maybe even slow. But inside, it's packed with top-tier modern hardware. The idea comes straight from the car world. Sleeper cars that look stock but hide race-level internals under the hood. And I've wanted a sleeper PC build like this for a long time. When I finally decided to do it, I knew one thing. If I was going to build a sleeper, I was going to pull out all the stops. The hunt for the perfect old case. The first and most important decision was the case. The case would determine the look of the entire system, what components would fit, and how much modding would be required. You'd think finding an old beige desktop case would be easy, but surprisingly, it wasn't. Locally, nothing. Online, vintage PC cases that were going for $150 or more, which I absolutely was not paying. So I waited, and I watched listings for months. Then I found this. An E-Machines T81, dating back nearly 20 years. And I managed to grab it for $40 shipped. For what people were paying for similar cases, that felt like a win. First look, pure early 2000s energy. The moment I opened the box, I knew this case was perfect. It had the classic beige plastic, old spec stickers still attached, a Windows Millennium Edition badge, and proudly advertised as an 850 MHz single-core Celeron. Peak early 2000s energy. Opening it up revealed a surprisingly complete system. Hard drive, multiple 5.25-inch bays, floppy drive, and all the hardware you would expect from that era. But immediately, one massive problem stood out. Problem 1, power supply fitment. There was no way a modern ATX power supply was going to fit. The original unit was much smaller and the internal layout wasn't designed for today's components. But honestly, that challenge was a part of the excitement. Turning an old steel box into something modern is what sleeper builds are all about. Tearing it down, nothing goes to waste. Before any modding could start, the case had to be completely stripped down. And don't worry, none of this old hardware is going to waste. I've got plans to revisit in a future video and see what a normal desktop experience was like decades ago. Once everything was removed, I was left with a bare steel chassis, a blank canvas. Modding begins, making space for the modern hardware. The first step was removing internal stickers and residue, not glamorous but necessary. Then came the biggest change. The drive cage had to go. I wanted the PC to look original from the outside, but internally, those optical drives were useless and blocked the power supply. A few rivets later, the cage was gone, instantly giving me more room. But fitting the PSU was still not easy. I removed metal tabs, cut indents, drilled access holes, and carefully carved out just enough space to slide a power supply into place. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I made a paper mounting template, measured obsessively, and drilled mounting holes because once you drill steel, there's no undo button. In the end, the PSU was securely mounted, even if only with 3 screws. This case was never designed for high-powered components, so airflow was critical. The original hardware barely produced heat, but modern CPUs and GPUs are a different story, so I added a rear exhaust fan and a front intake fan. The rear exhaust required cutting a large opening, measured, marked, and cut with a jigsaw. Not perfect, but functional. For the front intake, I went with a high-pressured fan since airflow into the front of the case is extremely limited. More cutting, more drilling, more metal everywhere. But airflow? Worth it. Painting the interior, from rusty box to clean build. With all the modding done, it was time to make things look intentional. First, I filed sharp edges, smoothed rough cuts, and sanded every surface to help the paint adhere. After cleaning everything thoroughly, I built a makeshift paint booth and chose a two-tone color scheme, light gray for the main color, light blue as an accent. Multiple thin coats later, and after carefully masking everything, the interior came together, and honestly, it looked way better than I expected. And before we keep going, if you're enjoying this build so far, hit that like button. It helps the channel a ton. And if you love sleeper builds, PC modding, and crazy tech projects like this, subscribe to the Tech Bowl, because we've got a lot more coming. Alright, back to the build. Preserving the sleeper look. Removing the 5.25-inch bays left a huge hole in the front panel, which would instantly ruin the sleeper illusion. So I reused the original drive covers and glued them in place and made the front look completely stock. But I still wanted modern functionality. The solution? Hidden front panel I/O. After modifying and trimming the 5.25-inch enclosure and fabricating custom brackets, I managed to mount USB ports and audio discreetly behind the original panel. From a distance, you'll never know. The front panel connectors were proprietary and unlabeled, which could have been a nightmare. Instead, I traced the PCB manually, identified the correct pins, and merged them with the standard motherboard connectors. After soldering, heat shrinking, and testing, power button check, power LED check, HDD activity light not check. Not perfect, but acceptable. Hardware time, the real surprise. Now comes the fun part. Inside this boring beige box is ridiculously overkill hardware. CPU, an 8-core, 16-thread Ryzen processor overclocked to 14 GHz, delivering insane value and performance. Motherboard, a budget-friendly board with solid VRMs, dual M2 slots, plenty of I/O, and a clean color scheme. RAM, 32 GB of DDR4 at 3200 MHz, completely unnecessary for gaming, but perfect for editing and productivity. GPU, a high-end graphics card capable of crushing modern games at 440p. Easily the most powerful GPU I've ever built with. Storage, a modest SSD, chosen simply because space was tight and this build wasn't meant to be permanent. Performance testing, Sleeper Unleashed. Once everything was assembled, it was time to see if the sleeper delivered. At 440p max settings, Doom 2016 flew past 120 frames per second. Shadow of the Tomb Raider averaged over 90 frames per second. Far Cry 5 hovered around 75 frames per second. Thermal stayed surprisingly controlled, around 70 degrees Celsius under load. For a nearly sealed beige case, that's impressive. Final thoughts. Mission accomplished. This project wasn't perfect. Some cuts weren't clean, some solutions were improvised, and cable management was creative. But that's what made it fun. Turning a 20-year-old office PC into a modern gaming monster was incredibly satisfying, and the sleeper aesthetic stayed intact. From the outside, nobody suspects a thing. From the inside, absolute chaos in the best way possible. If you enjoyed this build, smash that like button and subscribe to the Tech Bowl for more PC builds, tech breakdowns, and insane projects like this. Let me know in the comments, what sleeper build would you want to see next? Because this definitely won't be the last. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.